Добрый вечер. Давайте.
Let's start now, because we will have to leave this room at 8 p.m. Good? Do you copy? Do you copy? Do you copy now? Do you copy now? Do you copy?
А вот так вот как? Да?
Is it okay? Do you copy? Friends, let's start. Do you copy? Hello. So, do you have to use a hammer? Do you copy now? Good. Let's all of us be seated, because we'll be pushed out of the room at 8 p.m. and we will have to catch up with lots of things. Hello, my name is Zhanna Nemtsov. I'm the head of the Boris Nemtsov Foundation. I'm happy to be the moderator of this panel, the only panel where we have the gender equality principle mentioned by Karina. So I would like everything to be dynamic. The moderator is not going to be dwelling a lot. There will be 2 rounds of my questions, and then I would like you to be engaged in our discussion. So I would like to ask all of our presenters. We have 9 people here, to be brief and squeeze into 3 minutes when I ask you questions. Right now I'm going to introduce our panel. Mikhail, MAGLOV, journalist, investigator, the editor of the Scanner Project. Lola TAGAEVA, journalist, founder of the Verstka Media. Farida RUSTAMOVA, political journalist of Faridaily Media. Grigory SVERDLIN, founder of anti-war project Idite Lesom. Anastasia BURAKOVA, founder of the Kovcheg Foundation, or ZARK. Anti-feminist movement representative, Alexandra TALAVER, a feminist anti-war resistance, KYST head of sector EEAS Russia division in Brussels. He coordinates the diplomatic service of the EU on Russia, on the civil society in Russia and abroad. Hooray! And Vytis JURKONIS, everybody knows him, the director of Freedom House Lithuania. LIBEROV, also film director, producer, and screenwriter. So my question is, what you do right now, and why is it important, Alex? Yes, hello. Thank you very much for organizing this event, and thank you for organizing this panel. Thanks a lot to Zhanna. And those of you who stayed here and who still are resilient. I am from the anti-war grassroots movement launched on February 25th, 2022 through the Manifest. And then we established an online platform through which we have been mobilizing anti-war activity in Russia and abroad. According to our latest polls of our activists, we had 61 groups in Russia and 20 of them were abroad. The clear number of our activists is unclear because they are autonomous, and I won't be able to describe what we do in 3 minutes in brief. We are in the media because of our street actions, which were in different formats. We also publish an independent newspaper called Women's Truth. We provide psychological support. We help protecting labor rights of those who were fired for their anti-war activities, and we do many other things. But in my brief message, I would like to focus on the specificity of our movement, the grassroots, horizontal and democratic movement, considering that today we have heard a lot about dialogue about the necessity to unite about creating a coalition. It's important that we have this panel, and we also have the representatives of many grassroots initiatives here who provide direct support to asylum seekers and refugees from Ukraine and activists from Russia, like Equal Post Office, in transit agents of Russia, and Democracy Immigration for Action. Well, I'm sorry I do not see all of your faces, but this is a large gathering and a large community. As you know, it has shaped the anti-war and humanitarian initiatives platform, and this is the practice that we have been implementing in our operations in a truly true democratic and equal dialogue, because there is no option to build an alternative future if in our daily routines we do not introduce the principles we would like to see in the promising future. If in our daily operations we do not build these new institutions, the rules for equal and respectful attitudes which we once want to see as our utopia, and the feminist anti-monopoly service, and we pay a lot of attention to inclusion. We understand inclusion as giving the voice to vulnerable groups and special efforts needed for the underrepresented, less media covered, less white, less heterosexual, less able-bodied people to have an opportunity to have a word, and who are in vulnerable situations. And through this effort, through our strategic solutions, we always give the floor first to those who are the most vulnerable. By doing it, we as a movement, I believe, can find more agile strategies and various tactics, like underwriting banknotes, anti-war feeding of pigeons, building anti-war memorials, and they give us signs from the audience. And it seems to me it is critically important, right, to practice. Well, I'm coming to the end. I will be happy to debrief you on what we do, but first of all, here I would like you to pay attention to the principles of inclusion and democracy, which are a cognizable effort of those who look for it, but this is not designed through correct design of institutions, and we cannot avoid the inequality unless we do it in our daily mutual work. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to pass the floor to Jon because he has an important message, and then we continue. Yes, thank you for giving the floor to me. I dare to say that if you go to the website of the European Union, you will find the news that the European Union declares sanctions against a number of Russians, Deputy Minister of Justice inclusive, on the case of Vladimir Karamurza, under our sanctions regime on protecting human rights, the global sanctions regime on protecting human rights. I found that out. Uda and I have been waiting for this the whole day, waiting for this to be declared, and we have been waiting for this moment to announce this. So it was a little interruption, and then we continue according to the agenda. Mikhail, MAGLOV, you have the same question, please. I dare to continue. Probably you speak about Deputy Minister of Justice Alex Sviridenko, who is under sanctions. If it is so, this is good news. Surprisingly, the person who is responsible for keeping an eye on hundreds of foreign agents is under sanctions in summer 2023. However, in the UK, he has been under sanctions for half a year. I wanted to be speaking about sanctions. We, Scanner Project, have been investigating sanctions effectiveness, and today I could hear that we need more sanctions and more sanctions. I'm ready to agree with this, but there's a little detail May the European Union learn how to enforce sanctions adopted after the Crimea annexation in 2015. If we rephrase Dovlatov, the writer, regarding sanctions, we certainly curse Comrade Putin, but who supplied double-purpose goods worth of billions to Putin? Every single day, hundreds and thousands of goods for all these years have been supplied, and they continue being supplied directly to Russia. And we can see that in 8 years, the EU countries and governments have not been capable to seize supplies of parts for missiles, armored personnel vehicles like French microchips and infrared vision sites. So I have a number of proposals. European countries have to disclose customs declarations of the goods that are supplied to Russia and other countries that bypass sanctions. We know that governments cannot stop these supplies. Russian, European, and European civil society, once they study this, when they investigate these documents, they will be able to stop it. Action 2. Considering all these supplies of parts for missiles, how many cases have been started in Europe and investigated? How many European companies and citizens were convicted of bypassing sanctions, for bypassing sanctions? This is close to zero. There is no political will or insufficient political will in sanctions. Law enforcement agencies should be working on it. And the last thing, many of the presenters at panels discuss personal sanctions. You know, there are challenges about the personal sanctions. So while the European Union introduces sanctions against Sviridенko, he is in divorce with his wife and he rewrites all his assets to her name. Journalists try to prove that his wife is getting money from the sanctioned person and she needs to be included into the sanctions list. The paradigm of personal sanctions should be imposed not only on the sanctioned person, but on all his or her money, irrespective of who keeps the money. These people, these pockets shall also be included in the sanctions. I'm done with my 3 minutes. Lola TAGAEVA. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for ensuring gender equality in the last panel, and I can see women here and I can see the representatives of young projects if we're going to be speaking about the day after. I want to be speaking about how we should prepare for the day after. And I would like to recall those who were hardly mentioned today, the Russians themselves, their rights and their roles tomorrow. And I mean those who are in doubt that everything that is going on complies with what the authorities say, or who start doubting it. I mean those who should keep their minds clean, and they will be doing this day tomorrow. But how can we keep these people? And we definitely should be saying that there is no tomorrow possible without free media. Verstka, the project that I launched a year ago, emerged as an anti-war media. I believe, but for the full-scale invasion, the project wouldn't be there. It was my response and the response of my colleagues. There was an attempt to destroy independent media last spring in Russia, and we could see Russian media relocating, being shut down. They tried to relaunch. It was the time when it was needed to do something and to say something. We had to be saying about what was going on. What we could see back then, we could see that due to upscaling of the war, more and more challenges were emerging, and the Russians should have been aware of that, and the media were destroyed, and propaganda was gathering momentum, and its quality and its scale was expanding. So people inside the country are abundant of access to truthful information, and the situation is critical. We cannot afford ourselves leaving these people to propaganda for the propaganda to eat them. I do know there are many discussions on whether Russian media should be supported in the future, whether Russian media are needed at all. And I believe, and I'm going to be speaking about that in the second part of my speech. Okay, thank you, Farida. Hello. First of all, I would like to say thank you to all those who have stayed here till the beginning of our panel, because we do not have a lot of oxygen here. Everybody is exhausted, so I will stick to the agenda. And thank you very much to Zhanna, our moderator, for ensuring the gender balance, and everybody seems happy because of that. And thank you for bringing here all of us. I mean, I'm a new person here, and I appreciate that. My name is Farida RUSTAMOVA. I have my own media. It is called Faridaily. There is no such a word in the dictionary, but I decided that following tradition, naming the projects after your name, it's more typical for males, but I decided why a woman cannot do the same, so I keep the name still. We write about Russian authorities, about what is going on in the Kremlin and around it, how key decisions are made. I use my knowledge and connections in the authorities, and this is our main focus, speaking on what is going on in the black box. Another important thing that we do, it's important to me, is direct communication with the audience. We try to read everything is written to us and to communicate with our subscribers directly. And we believe that now, and we can see the feedback of the audience, this is one of the most critical things for them, because we are read by Russians mostly. Journalism, at least for me, is a very Thanksgiving work, because I have never heard so many words of thanks, and I have been in journalism for a decade. I have never read so many good things. They text, don't leave us alone, thank you for not abandoning us. Another part of our audience is much smaller, but it is there. These are Russian civil servants, the people who make important decisions in Russia. It's difficult to be speaking about it, but I can open the curtain a bit. It's important to keep ties with this audience too. This has been mentioned earlier today. It's impossible to ensure illustration of all. Not everybody is directly related to war crimes. These are the people who will never disappear, for good or for bad, therefore promoting democratic values. This is what we should do among these people too. What else? Well, maybe I should say what we should do and what mistakes we made, but I will get back to it in the next part. My 3 minutes are over. Okay, thank you very much. We have very disciplined panel. Amen. I appreciate the team, and I do not deserve to be here. I appreciate inspired by what you do. I cannot imagine what would be without what you do. Thank you so much. And the question was what you do. Why do you believe it is important? Our process is called a dialogue. I believe that this is the paramount thing that is hard to keep, and we should keep it. The dialogue with everybody, all ages, genders, people in exile and inside the country. Dialogue means some language. I cannot but say that I'm sorry for not having one language. out of the list for the 12 hours, I work in art at a grassroots level. I'm sorry that the language of art is out of this dialogue. I would like to remind you that this dialogue is not active, but it's ever and overarching. We've established a project called After Russia. This is a large musical album where the stars who had to flee from Russia sang a song based on the poem of the first wave of Russian immigration. I'm not speaking about millions of listeners of that, but I'm the author and the producer of the album, and I can see the statistics that the country that listens to it, it's a geolocation after all these Krasovsky and Ferelepin deeds. This has not been removed from Yandex Music. I can see a report that the first country is Russia and the second one is Ukraine. And this dialogue needs to be preserved. What else I do? I agree with the words by Aristovich, and in fact I believe this is the most difficult thing we will have to do. We will have to learn all the lessons all over again. We will have to break all the myths, colossal gap in education, not in somebody in particular, but in all of us. And when we try to say that there was no great victory, there was no great patriotic war of 1812. Well, when we will have to explain it all, and we will have to do it, because otherwise, without creating this beautiful old past, we won't be able to create a beautiful, good future. There are so many gaps, we will have to bridge them. Starting from February 24th, I'm the producer, and I lecture every single day. Just lectures on various topics. I'm trying to somehow bridge the gaps. I understand that I'm helpless, but I'm trying to bridge at least some of the gaps, and I believe you understand why it is important to me, and I would like to introduce art, all its types and genres, into this dialogue, which is absolutely important.
Настя?
Nastya. Hello everyone. Thank you for surviving until now. I'm Anastasia BURAKOVA, co-founder of ARC project, which we launched immediately after the war. It was not a question for us, should I or shouldn't I help. As a human rights defender, I worked for a long time. The people who were prosecuted because of their political position, and when the war started, dozens of people started writing to me, and thank you to the colleagues who agreed to help me pro bono to help me. And very quickly we grew into quite a large project, which is not only a project for activists, journalists and human rights defenders, our colleagues, but also for those who were never integrated into any political movements, for whom communicating their anti-war position, be it on social media, or going to the first anti-war protest, or to any other activism, anti-war graffiti or anti-war petitions, became the first civil action, and we became a kind of entry point for them. And now on chats or on social media and in other resources we have almost 500,000 audience, which again, not only our usual environment where we all know each other. I think this is highly valuable. Through our resources, we also try to confront the propaganda because we are trusted. We have some set of humanitarian action, but we also focus on values for quite a while. And in line with practical information, we also provide information on independent media, anti-war, civil projects which need help. IT people contact us, physicians contact us, usually people of different professions, which usually are not very active in civil society, but we receive many requests from them and they are ready to help. Another very important area of work for me is supporting anti-war initiatives, and the majority of people who are present here today, these are amazing projects which are doing great job. They know us in this way or another, and they know that we are open for promoting, for building bridges, for organizing networking events, or to develop some necessary skills. We try to help as much as possible. And this is what we are doing now. And we have come to understand that this audience, which was out of our reach previously, they all are doing their best. And as I know, many of you are also covering the audiences beyond our bubble. But we also follow from comments that when, in addition to some practical information, we would publish information about war crimes, about the war and repression. But first, in May or in April 2022, we would get at least half of the comments that come on, don't speak that much about politics, don't introduce conflicts, it's not that unambiguous, let's speak about visas of freelancers. But now, to our posts, we only get 1 or 2 such comments, and our audience has grown quite a lot. So by the small drops, we preserve the human capital for the future of Russia. And sometimes during meetings, and behind the scenes or in public discourse, I might hear from foreign colleagues, let's just forget about Russia. Friends, it's 140 million people. This is a vast country, and there are some countries next to Russia which are not members of NATO. And even if you wanted to build a wall, it will not be technically possible. And you cannot you cannot isolate it. So after Ukraine, it can be next country. So without participation of Russians in democratization of Russia, and in general, without democratization of Russia, Europe will never have peace and it will never have security, because tomorrow it can be another country endlessly supplying weapons and counting human toll. It's not possible to continue monitoring this horror. So it's in the best interest of our European security to come to democratic Russia as soon as possible. Grigory? Good evening, my name is Grigory SVERDLIN. I'm the head of Idite Lesom project. I want to thank you for what you are doing, because what you are doing every day and what people are doing in Russia, opposing dictatorship every day, and there are many such people, makes me believe in the future of my home country, which I greatly appreciate and commend you for. The Idite Lesom project, we launched it together with my colleagues immediately when Putin launched mobilization. We help people to defect or surrender. So we help people not to stay alone against the machine of mobilization and conscription. So the main bulk of the people whom we help never end up in the army and in the war. And currently we already have helped 10,213 individuals. I have checked the stats before my speech. I think there are many places where you can apply yourselves if you want to do something in Russia to get closer to the end of the war. And there were unfortunately not many places where you can apply yourselves. But one of these places is definitely assisting the people who don't want to end up in the war, but who already are in war, but who don't want to shoot at Ukrainians, is one of such places. This is why I find it tremendously important. Mostly I'm coming from the charity world, but I see this project as civic disobedience or civic resistance. And in my view, this is a way of doing something to prevent people from pressing the trigger and shooting at Ukrainians, maybe preventing one person, then one more person, then yet one more person. And this is a thing of great importance. So we shouldn't believe that the machine of Ministry of Defense will immediately be able to recruit new people to substitute the people whom we help to defect or surrender. This ministry is very inefficient and extremely ineffective. Of course, they will try to substitute all these people who quit, but it will take them long time. It takes lots of resources and delays, and I strongly believe that it really weakens Putin's army. So yes, we should be helping Ukrainians in every way possible, and I strongly hope that we will have more and more weapons for the Ukrainian army. However, in parallel, we can also remember that we can help the people in Russia who don't want to take up arms against Ukraine, and to help the defectors who risk their lives and freedom. Because as you know, these people are added to the wanted list, and if caught, they risk to end up in prison for a long time. So it's very important to help them. So I would like to take a chance in this building to call on EU member states to provide better support to such people. It was very recently when I found the statistics when Germany, which is probably the champion in Europe by issuing humanitarian visas, granted only 2% of applications from defectors from the Russian army. So only 2% of applications were granted. Timing. Okay, I'm about to complete. So we need some common European approach to Russian defectors and support to Russian defectors and offering them asylum. I think it's extremely significant because it does not only help some real people, but it also brings the victor of Ukraine closer to us. Thank you. Vytis. Hello, I'm Vytis JURKONIS from Lithuania, from Freedom House office. I have heard many things about what I do, many ways to describe it, and I think mostly these things are not deserved. When I hear that Germany is the champion in humanitarian visas, I cannot stay silent. I can say that most likely some neighboring Lithuania, small Lithuania, is the champion. So we are the team of 5, and we were working on facilitating Lithuanian visas for thousands of Democrats from Belarus and Russia. This process started earlier than yesterday. It started back in 2012 or 2013 after Bolotnaya case. And there are many people in this room who used this opportunity back then, including also Natalia Arnov from Free Russia Foundation. Back then, it was IRI, it was mostly for political actors, while now it is mostly for the civil society actors. And I can remember back then I was saying that you are moving to follow the Belarusian scenario, and they said, no, we are much better developed. This is why we knew quite well what we had to do in 2020 and in 2022, because it was thanks to the political will of Lithuania and our joint work we had trust and opportunities of this cooperation. I can hear frequently that Lithuania is a hub of political or oppositional activities. Partially it can be understood because there are guys of Khodorkovsky, there are guys from Kasparov, Entourage, Free Russia Forum, as the team of Navalny, but it's not exactly the case. Of course, there is a different political spectrum ranging from nationalists to anarchists. If we speak about my organization, we don't work with politicians on the opposition, because partly here the opposition sometimes speaks on behalf of the civil society without sometimes even understanding what civil society is. And I need to say that diversity in Vilnius and in Russia is much higher. These are LGBT activists, gender initiatives, feminist movement, and the huge journalistic society. When they say there is media hub there or media hub here. So, for your understanding, last year we facilitated 455 journalists and media people and their family members for relocation. For Russian media space, I think this is significant. And also the community of experts and academia, and also artists mentioned by Liberov. Artists, musicians and authors. However, it's not our task to relocate people. We are interested in preserving the human capital. It's important to relocate them so that they can continue doing their job. But another task is about helping to maintain the infrastructure to support the people still staying in Russia, which is extremely important because now, because of all this process, we see the growing group which will need to use the money which are intended for Russia. We hear very frequently that there are no people remaining in Russia, that it's too dangerous to work in Russia. Back in 2013 or 14, civil society people said, let us decide what is too risky and what's not too risky. So please don't do this choice for us. And we are also a kind of radar or dispatcher among NGOs and donors, visa policy, bank servers, cross-border prosecution, and also sanctions. And of course, it's not possible to do it without Russian partners. Thank you. Jan, thank you for your question. It's quite an open question. What the European Union is doing? The European Union is trying to do everything to prevent the Second World War from happening. This is the overall historical goal of the European Union. This is the goal towards which the European Union is working, having the mandate of 27 member states and millions of European voters. What is the European Union doing? The European Union recognizes that there is no difference between the value-based and interest-based policies. For example, the European Union acknowledges, and references have already been made to the words of Sakharov, which is also in the foundation of the EU's policies, that of course the external aggression is always combined with internal repression. So acknowledging these 3 points, avoiding the next world war, lack of clear difference between policy of values and policy of interests, and the connection between the internal repression and external aggression, the European Union, in the area of supporting Russian civil society, does many different things. We support independent media, we support human rights defenders, we support NGOs of different kinds. We continue doing this and will continue expanding this work, in particular through the partners whom we support. And we are not stopping this. Today we have also heard from our political leadership in the morning that this is unchangeable and continuing policy. How is the European Union doing this? We are doing this predominantly. Well, what enables us to do this? We're enabled by partnerships with you. The fact that you are coming to see us in Brussels, the fact that you are inviting us to our your conferences, to your workshops and your activities, the fact that you are maintaining this connection puts us in position of having relations with you, different relations, not just helping you as a donor. This is a thing to do, but in parallel we are finding some mutual interest and mutual benefit in meeting each other and informing each other. What did allow the European Union to be in position to play the crucial role in de facto saving the independent Russian media after 24th February was the fact that days before this date, namely on 15th February, we enacted a new, large and very ambitious program to support media. From somewhere we got this wisdom, and the EU was capable 9 days before the beginning of the full-fledged invasion of Russian troops in Ukraine to play this role. We were able to do this because we were listening to you, we were hearing you, and you were telling us in 2019, in 2020, and in 2021, the things were only about to deteriorate. And we saw that people were relocating, and based on this partnership with you, and based on this dialogue that we had with you, which we are continuing here today, the European Union found itself in a position to help. And it was quite well informed to help without delays. We'll continue doing this. What is done here, thank you, Mr. Kubilius, thank you to your colleagues in the European Parliament for playing this vital role in organizing these events. On our side, we're consolidating our media support programs with human rights support and NGO support in a program for public diplomacy, in the framework of which we have already brought many of you to Brussels to study trips, and will continue and will do more of this, including for getting information from you and more information about your needs and what can the future look like. Not only to agree on how we work together in the future, but at least for us to be able, the way we were able in February this year, in partnership with you, to be proactive and not to be reactive and lagging behind the events, and react in timely manner. Thank you. I want to speak to my panel. If we give the second question, we'll not have enough time from the audience. Do you want the second question from me, or do you want me to proceed to the questions from the audience? What's your choice? Some people want the second question from me, so not all people will answer, and then we'll get the question from the audience, because we have to leave at 8 and we started behind the schedule. So the question is, what should be done to improve the chances for democratization in Russia, and most importantly, for these democratic institutions to be sustainable? Who would like to answer? If I may, briefly, I'll try to answer this question, not as a journalist. We are doing our journalistic part, but as a citizen of Russia who's been living in emigration for quite a long time, as a non-participant of not a single political coalition or a group, but as a potential voter and someone who has been demanding the change in Russia for years, hoping for reconstruction of Russia and its future. Today I've heard in many presentations, and I can sadly state that the leaders, the politicians, increasingly speak about building some cabinet, comparing to cabinet of Tikhanovskaya. There were also comparisons to de Gaulle today. Some people speak about our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The sooner, the more leaders only speak to the people who left Russia, and they leave others behind in Russia, staying out of communication with them. I want these leaders to look back to them, because on the background of those who are imprisoned, we are reading their letters, and very frequently they talk directly to the people of Russia who live in Russia. And the second, very brief one, it's been said a lot today about the democratic community. Definitely, we do have the democratic community, but the further, the more we see that our democratic community is lacking democratic procedures, and pretty much it works vertically, coming down from the people who refer to themselves as today's de Gaulles. And also I heard that our power is in unity. I strongly hope that our power will not be in unity, but in democratic European values and in diversity. Thank you. Sasha? Okay, thank you so much. I would like to briefly say on two important points that were not much discussed today, but I hope that tomorrow they will be discussed more. First is, of course, well-known connection of gender violence and military violence. The study which shows the correlation of physical security of women and vulnerable groups in countries and the probability of resorting to war. The feminist external policies adopted by many EU member states and many other studies demonstrating the need for gender equality, physical security of women and marginalized groups, for ensuring sustainable peace. And I would even not refer to it as feminist foreign policy, but actually re-comprehending security and attempts towards finding sustainable security. So that's the first important point I would like to make. It's clear that in today's Russia, these traditional gender roles and gender hierarchy provoke military violence and gender-based violence, and also violence against LGBTIQ plus persons, and all these issues should not be postponed. Because if our freedom does not include the people who are more vulnerable, then no one has freedom in the end. Today this phrase has been quoted frequently, but I'm not sure that it was well itemized. So we, non-white, sometimes indigenous people, LGBTIQ plus persons, persons with disability, women, single mothers, and many other vulnerable groups which don't have resources for being included in political processes. So this is an important second part, the feminist recomprehension of security as security of life, food security and physical security of lives rather than security of borders and weapons. So this focus on care and security of life seems to be a successful political strategy not only in the future but also today, because the studies of public opinion in Russia are depressive that they can also give us some hope for our work. First, that namely the group of women's 45 plus, which takes care of their children and about their parents, are among those who strongly change opinion about the special military operation in Ukraine. Second, according to Russian field opinion polls, if I remember right, but I remember the share, 43%, only 43% of women want this special military operation to be continued, as opposed to 54% of men. And 48% are for talks, compared to 40% among men. So this experience of care, experience of being concerned about their family members and concerned about the material security of their families is the mechanism which can be used. And we not only work with the youth, we also have the project in Odnoklasniki with different audiences, with the focus on opposition of this military, geopolitical security, imperial security, the security of life and protection of life. Thank you very much. Lola? Thank you. I will be very brief in answering this about what should be done to follow up on your idea that we don't have the right to leave the undecided people or doubting people behind alone with this regime and the propaganda, which means that we have to continue offering independent journalism. And I will just quote, in the case of the project that I launched a year ago, and maybe this is my answer to the question, what exactly can be done? We started layout without some brand behind our back, which meant that we had no money nor the audience in the beginning, and what we could do was only to come up with timely responses to requests coming from our audiences inside Russia. And of course, they have such requests because this government creates problems for them every day. Not only they create the problems for them with this war, and there are more and more of such problems, but in parallel they offer them their own agenda, imposing it on them, and our task is to tell the truth. So what we could do, in some degree it was a pure experiment to check if we can do something without some resources and if we can grow. And we found out that if we work to meet the popular demand and you respond to questions coming from the audience, which means coming up with exclusive information, being very first to respond, then the audiences will follow you because it's important for them. So my point is that we must remember that we have to continue producing good quality reporting, because these people who will keep clear vision on this day after, they will be creating the new Russia. Thank you.
Farida? Yes, thank you. I will do my best to be brief. Please stop me if I am too excited. Okay, I would like to mention two things. I have already started saying that when answering the first question. I believe I'm going to be speaking about journalism only about media. I believe new media, and not only new ones, but those that continue operating independent media, can no longer be as close from the audience as they used to be before. Russian media of the previous generation were incredibly closed from their audience, and they hardly knew it. Whatever I can recall, like letters to the editorial house, well, it did not exist. I came to journalism in 2011. Russian media of the old generation focused on their work. There were multiple reasons for that, but today this is not longer possible. This is no longer possible. Just keeping informing the audience to promote your values is not enough. I believe it is a critically important thing, and this is critically important not only for the media to grow and to build trust among Russians to journalists, because discreditation campaigns to discredit independent journalists is 20 years plus old. This is what Putin started doing when he came to power. And the second thing I would like to say, it seems to me new media, independent current media, should do their own new professional community. They should build it. This is what we, in my view, we have never had prior to the war, and we don't have it today. We have never had any normal representation. We had no association to deal on community issues that would resolve conflicts, that would solicit its interests or lobby them anywhere. We simply did not have it. A simple example is as follows. Who can recall when the last time there was a protest on destroying some media? Interpreters cannot hear the floor. I'm speaking about the street protest prior to the war. I mean, what was before the war, when Medusa was shut down and people went to the Fontanka Square. I was there. I could frequently hear from my colleagues that it's not so good to protect yourselves. Other people should protest for you, and we should fight for our rights, and we should unite in order to fight for common interest. Thank you, Roman. I get back to culture. As long as I breathe, I will be speaking about culture. Though the most spread message, your culture has never saved anyone, has never helped anybody, we don't need it. But this is bullshit. Think of it, this is bullshit. Culture, nobody saved anybody. This is not a military unit. Culture can see where we should not dive or put red flags beyond which we should not go. And I would like to remind you that culture is the only universal language that we still have. So I cannot but mention this. And one more thing. This is about the tone. We want to talk to those who are back home. I do not hope to come back, but many of us hope. Many of you hope. And it's very important to choose a right tone when you address the homeland, especially when the skin has been ruptured, and what is going on in immigration seems like the division of roles in a beautiful future. And I would like us to keep an eye on the tone. Well, it is clear that there are things like this forum, whether people will find out about it or not, but some deeds will play a role, some important deeds, and how you speak about it, and that these deeds become known. I'm not very experienced in the media, and speaking of practicalities, I do not have solutions. I'm not a politician. I'm dealing with culture, and I will always be working on culture. There are two scripts to consider. Because of multiple relocations, I have painful sores. As you know, there are various visa types. I really appreciate the European countries, and the gigantic number of arts people came here, either cello players or designers or anybody. Let's say if it's not a designer but a violin player, lost everything, all opportunities, and they lost the infrastructure. Let's say a musician, an instrument player should not be a producer, and there are no producers for them, and I can see multiple of those people, and this is a great thing for you. Maybe you should invest into those people to offer some stipends for them not to cut meat in the restaurants or to drive taxi cabs, because they won't be able to produce culture doing it in the second shift, and a small stipend or a small scholarship or financial support for them to rent apartments will relieve them from fear, and once they are out of fear, they will return this investment in full. And the second thing, I call on dialogue and mercy. There's a huge number of guys back home. They do not think about politics. They don't know whether they support Putin or not, but they don't want to kill anyone. They may even believe in something begun, because if allegedly saying if we don't kill them, then they will kill us. They cannot emigrate. The majority of them do not have passports for foreign travels, and they don't have money. It's not disputable. They have never been traveling anywhere. There's a fear of relocation, and there are so many people I could see in my latest trips to Primorye, Murcia, Bashkortostan, areas in Russia, where these are the people without any rights protected. If you have a passport, you can go to Yerevan, Armenia, and what if there's any dormitory and there's a small canteen? Well, let it be for 300 people only, but I mean, there are ways to disseminate information about that to help somebody. I do understand that you are helping somebody. Maybe somebody mentioned it, and I respect Zhanna. I follow the agenda. Thank you. Thank you. You are not afraid of me. Anastasia? I would say that Putin's regime managed to engrave in people that policy is not for them. Politics is not for them, and the propaganda narratives that are voiced by the representatives of the Duma members, no Putin, no Russia. You know the statements. Everybody who lived in Russia, you recall these associations. And in fact, 4 days ago, we, under great support of anti-war committee, and the Noah's Ark is supporting people. We have diaspora initiatives who perceived this project very well prior to launching it, when we discussed it, when we said that we needed this project. The first flight project that has been launched recently in 3 to 4 days. I didn't see the statistics for today, but over 1,000 applications were submitted by those who have never been engaged in any political parties or movements. There are very cool experts and showing the models of the future and developing them and drafting the roadmap for the transition, for the future reforms, showing that there will be no abyss after Putin, and that there would be some black hole instead of Russia after Putin, that will be this and that countries moved, transited from dictatorship to democracy, and then in easy language, we should explain how the transition period and post-Putin period are going to be engineered are important because many people who stay in the country, those people who have never been engaged in politics, have no understanding of what is going to be in the future, how it's going to be in the future. Even many of us here were born when Putin was already in power. I was a kid when Putin came to power, and many of us did not have the years lived without Putin. And we should say that there should be institutions. Not everything should depend on one person. And I believe this part of the project is critically important. And we've managed yesterday and today to talk to various initiatives that launch various tracks for various audiences. They launch education campaigns saying that your domain can be built not on corruption, but your domain can operate well inside the country. It can be independent of loyalty or keeping silence or on abandoning your own opinion or not expressing it. So those who said today that they would be doing this work in their domains, let's disseminate information about the projects of one another. Let's invite new audiences, your audience and our audience. Let's show the images of the future and showcase to people, including people in Russia, through public discussions, through using easy language to show how this is going to look like after Putin. And whatever we build based on normal institutions will look better than this regime that kills people in the neighboring country, this massacre regime. I would like to be brief in order to give the opportunity to the floor. First, it seems to me that this narrative or propaganda that the majority of Russians support the war, this is nonsense. Yes, many people follow the stream, but the majority was not seen by me in Russia, and I cannot see today. Some time ago, we launched a service called Waste Paper Collection, and we suggested to send us the mobilization summons and military contracts, and there are people who send us pictures of that. This is a way for civil resistance, and we received a few leaked message exchanges with local authorities. People were sent to municipalities to enroll more people in mobilization, and they complain to one another, and they say that there are closed doors when they try to mobilize people, and they are cursed, and they are sent to hell by the people who would like to mobilize. It's important. We should provide opportunities in order to somehow, at least virtually, digitally, this civil resistance to be shown, to be there, for people to see that they are not alone. Because, in fact, this is what propaganda tries to prove to all of us. And the second story is related to the previous one. I was sitting and thinking about the Churchill's words. He was asked whether he's an optimist or pessimist, and he said, I'm an optimist because there is no sense being something different. I believe what we do is optimism, and optimism is our job duty. If we do something in order to near the end of the war and to get closer to free democratic Russia, then we should believe that this belief, this faith should be supported. Thank you. Let's take 3 questions at once, and you tell us who you address this question to and introduce yourself.
PP trainee, and currently, so I'm originally from Georgia, country which occupied by Russia. I'm talking about 20%. The site is Abkhazia and Skin Valley. It's really interesting, and I was waiting this moment because it's a final panel. So, strategies of new generation of Russia. How you see Georgia's territorial integrity in the future? And of course, with the Georgia, we have to speak and underline also Moldova and Transnistria region. How is your future and how is your, so we are waiting for the consequences of your future steps. And please make
Thank you very much for your question. Who should...
This
okay,
question,
second question.
The second question, please. During this panel, we didn't hear about your support to Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova in EU and NATO process. So how is your, are you supporting EU and NATO, so as Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova to become the members? Thank you.
Thank you. Давайте возьмем еще два вопроса. Еще один, пожалуйста.
Let's take two more questions. Dmitry Dubrovsky, Karls University, the Master's Research Program named after Boris Nemtsov. I have a brief question to all panelists. Will anybody recall, but for one person who was here, that there's one more group which is a significant source for the Russian opposition. This is the Russian Academy of Russian Academy abroad, and there is no such an academy. I would like to recall the words of Napoleon. Scientists and asses should be called to the middle. Well, very often academicians are solitary creatures, and this is a very difficult situation for them because of the visa regime, and certainly they get closer to people of arts, like musicians and artists. And I have a question to the representatives of the European Union and to the panelists. How do you see possible cooperation with academicians, and how do you see the difficulties faced by academicians in foreign countries? Okay, are we going to have to take one more question? No. Wait. Okay, let it be you. I'm sorry. Please. I have the following question. You have been speaking about gender inequality. Please introduce yourself. My name is Mira. I am from indigenous of Russia. And I speak on behalf of a few other institutions like Free Yakutia Foundation, Free Divine Foundation, and many other foundations that are the voices of the national republics. And since we have been speaking about gender equality, it would be interesting for me to be speaking about ethnical equality. When we speak about imperialism, we do not speak about imperialistic actors and our autonomous republics and autonomous actors that are in Russia and that comprise about 40 million people, which means 28% of the country's population. How democracy can be designed if we ignore such a large portion of the population? I would like to ask you, what measures do you envisage in order to make democracy more inclusive and to pass the floor to republics like through new platforms and to inform about their existence? I do not speak about Europeans. Even many Russians do not know what nations are in Russia and the nationalities, and they are eligible to be engaged in such discussions. Thank you. We cannot take any more questions. Let's start answering the first question, please. Do we have an interpretation? Can we answer in Russian? Yes, of course. First of all, I would like to say that today, numerously, we have been speaking about the Berlin Declaration that was signed in late April by a large representation of various initiatives and organizations and projects, inclusive the issue of territorial integrity of Georgia, Moldova, removing Russian troops from all the occupied territories which are under enormous pressure, and certainly, of course, from the occupied territories of Georgia. I live in Tbilisi, and I really appreciate Georgia for enabling me to continue my work there quite safely. And on a monthly basis, I can see protests where activists are not only against the war in Ukraine, but also against the occupation of Georgia. Here we can see Igor Koruptsev from Eurasia Foundation, from the Caucasus, and Lifeline G, and these people help those who live in the occupied area, and they collect humanitarian aid, and they continue speaking about occupation of Georgia in social media. So certainly this issue is raised in the democratic community, and this has been mentioned today. Those statements and pillars of the declaration, and the majority is subscribed to them. The majority, practically all of the initiatives and politicians who have been here subscribed to it and signed it. And this includes the projects and human rights defenders and journalists who live in Georgia as well. And this is also about the issue of the occupied Georgian territories. Ion will answer the question by Dmitry, right? Ion? Yes, thank you, Dmitry, for your question about the Russian Academy of Sciences. Absolutely right. We are in the times when everything develops so rapidly. Indeed, the European Union, after a full-scale invasion in Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, largely cut or reduced cooperation with Russia in the domains in which Russian representatives of authorities were engaged, because academic cooperation, building these ties between European scholars and academicians and their Russian colleagues, was based on the system in which the European Union supported the already launched and effective contracts on cooperation between the universities. And after the full-scale invasion, after the known letter of Russian rectors of universities, the European Union suspended cooperation under the Erasmus Plus project with the Russian universities. Certainly, we were sorry to do that, because prior to the full-scale invasion, Russian students had been the key partners in Erasmus Plus in academic mobility. And as you are absolutely right, how to expand it. After February 24th last year, we narrowed our cooperation, and cooperation like media, human rights, NGOs, feminists, LGBT, it was narrowed, and then we can see that it has been expanding, and we can see each other, Dmitry. We meet each other there, and this is gathering pace, and this will gather even more pace when we develop relations with the Russian Democratic Academy of Sciences. Those academicians who have not subscribed to the letter signed by the rectors. We do understand that you need infrastructure. Russian academicians have very good ties with your European colleagues, and we try to see how to build these networks, how to build the infrastructures to support these relations. And I also have a brief remark on the indigenous nations of Russia in Far East, etc. In general, the European Union, I can be speaking on behalf of all our colleagues who were here today in the morning, that we are inspired when we see inclusion, when we see feminists, when we see LGBT people, when we see indigenous nations and nationalities engaged in the work, because then we can see new ideas have been coming from there. And the policy is based, positive policy is based on identity. The war that is going on against Ukraine is also the war against Ukrainian identity. Fighting for your identity is not a fashion of the youth, but this is the human right. And this is a thing which is important for democracy and for safety and security. And as I said, the European Union has sees no difference between the policy of interest and the policy of values. And this is a vivid example. Therefore, we should be fighting for these rights.
About NATO and EU enlargement for Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova.
Давайте, Vytis.
Давайте, мне кажется,
it would be nice to be speaking about geopolitics, but in this panel we said very clearly the value agenda. If we speak about human rights, then the international law and freedom and self-determination of nations, etc., based on that, it's the same. We and Europeans should cognize, if we speak about geopolitics all the time, then the basis of all security, and this has been mentioned by many, this is human rights and freedoms and international law. It has been abandoned for 20 years in Russia when there was when there were purges of Chechen gays and journalists were murdered. Where you, Georgian politicians, have been there, we can finger point to one another, and this is the key responsibility and accountability. The purpose of this conference is to build trust, and the trust is not based on resolutions and statements, but it is based on joint actions. The other thing, all of you should believe in yourselves in what you do. We do not know what will happen. If we hunt for success stories, what promotes the agenda. If we follow the trends during info war, this is very dangerous. If we do things just to tick the box, we will never break through. In Lithuania, I can tell you, I am from Lithuania, the integrity of factories played their role. Environment, folklore, Catholic chronicles, basketball, Sąjūdis, youth, and Baltijos Kelias, and all of these things brought us to independence and to the devastation of the USSR. Believe in what you do. Do not chase every foundation. If you deal with environment, okay, you're great. You are working on the forest, okay, work on the forest. And if you work on LGBT, okay, do it. What's the question? Thank you very much. Unfortunately, well, I do know we have many questions. We had many questions, but we have to wrap up because they will push us out of the Euro Parliament at 8 p.m. And before they push us out, there are a few housekeeping matters to be mentioned, and I would like to appreciate all the members of this panel and the active audience. Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow. Okay, your housekeeping matters, please.
Especially for this fantastic panel to end the day. Two questions that I want to answer. First, how you can leave the building, and second, how you can come back tomorrow. I think it's important. So to leave the building today, please take the elevator or the lift or the escalator down to floor 0. You can all exit the building independently. You do not need our help. You need to stand on 2 little blue feet at the door, and it will start turning. Now, to come back tomorrow, it's a little bit more difficult. First, we have a different venue. It's room 3E2. For those who work here, you know what it means. Go there. For those who do not know what it means, you probably need our help to enter the building. So, first of all, please make sure you have your visitor pass, this card that you stick on your clothes, with you. We will not have a new one for you tomorrow. So you must bring the one that you have. And also, please have your personal document, your passport with you. We will be waiting for you at 8 o'clock, starting at 8 o'clock, at the main entrance of the parliament, at more or less the same place where we met you today. So please come as early as you can, because at around 8:40, it's the rush hour, and we have massive traffic jams because everybody is entering the building, so the security is jammed. So please come as early as you manage. We will be there. Let me see. Yes, I think this is all. I wish you all a beautiful evening in Brussels to get some fresh air finally, and we will see each other tomorrow.